Missoula Then and Now.
Available right out here.
Stan Cohen, is it Cohen, right? Okay. I want to make sure I put the emphasis on the right syllable. And Philip Maechling, the co-authors of the newly published Missoula Then and Now, are here with us to offer a look at Missoula over the last 100 years. They explore how we learn about place by understanding the processes that make place, and they'll show us photos that illustrate how and why Missoula changes and how it remains looking the same. And is the exhibit still out at the airport? No.
Yes, it is.
Okay, there's also a fascinating exhibit if you checked in early because the TSA told you to. There's a great exhibit out at the airport that I believe we helped fund. And I like it in particular because it transposes the two, and then I walk around town and stand in those same places and look at where the recent picture was taken and try and imagine what it was like back when the original picture was taken. Stan wrote his first book in 1976 on the Civil War, and Missoula Then and Now is his 80th book. Stan is a founder and first director of the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula. He runs the Museum of Mountain Flying, probably one of my favorite places in Missoula that a lot of people don't know about. He's the vice president of the Rocky Mountain Museum of Military History, the president of the Northern Rockies Heritage Center, and he's been with the Missoula Historical Preservation Commission for 20 years. He's also the publisher at Pictorial Histories Publishing Company. He's published about 325 books, with 35 on Alaska and the Yukon, and more than he can count on the Civil War and World War II. Philip Maechling is the Historic Preservation Officer and Preservation Planner at Missoula's Office of Planning and Grants. He is also an advisor on historic and cultural resources for land use and development projects, and local history preservation program manager for the Missoula Historic Preservation Commission and the Missoula Historic Preservation Awards. In August 2007, he was appointed by Governor Schweitzer to the Montana Heritage Preservation and Development Commission. And I neglect that I won't be able to attend most of this because one of my responsibilities is to go around and take photos of each of these events, so I will take a few. But Philip and Stan, enjoy.
I guess I'm going to lead off. I know a lot of you know me, and I know a lot of you in here. Just real quick, I've been here 49 years, came out to work as a geologist for the U.S. Forest Service, got in the ski business, some of you know, and been publishing books for 34 years. And both these books are done by Arcadia, which is a huge outfit out of Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. I think they're actually an English company. And they pump these out one a day, maybe 10 a day, I don't know. They've got over 5,000 titles, everything you can conceive of. And so I did this a few years ago, Missoula postcards, through the Swoboda collection at the Northern Rockies Heritage Center. I think Swoboda gave us about 20,000 postcards of all of Montana. But I had my own collection, so actually most of these are really from my collection. And it is for sale out at the deal there. And then they approached both Philip and I guess, about doing Missoula Then and Now, which is a series they've done all over the country. And quite honestly, it's kind of a no-brainer in a sense because I think most of you know I have a huge Missoula photo collection and other Missoula items, which are getting cataloged right now at the Fort Missoula Museum. And upon my demise, which I hope is a few years from now, everything's going to the museum, all of my Missoula collection. So we picked, I think 99% of the photos were either from my collection or what Philip had done, which is out at the airport and in the courthouse both, I believe.
Right, and at City Hall.
But we took a lot of photos that weren't in that particular setup and went out. And then we tried to spread this out a little bit more than just Missoula, 9 Mile. Let's see, where else did we go? That was
Travelers Rest.
Travelers Rest.
Missoula.
Just a few other places outside the city limits. And took the old photos and went back and tried to stay in the same place. Before Philip shows the slides, I brought just a little bit of my map collection, and afterwards y'all should come up and just take a look at them, and you can see the progression of the city and the surrounding area. So this is 1891, which is the oldest map that I have, and then 1905, this is 09, 1914. Then I brought kind of a fun map I picked up, I think from the 30s, of downtown with businesses. Some of you will recognize these if you've been around for a long time, like Daily Meats, the Fox Theater, Missoula Laundry, which they just tore the building down, which really bugged me because it was an old building.
An old A.J. Gibson building, actually.
Was it a Gibson? Oh,
Was
okay.
originally.
The Wilma building, so you can kind of get a date on this by what these ads are, and so it's kind of neat. But it was kind of a fun map. I don't know. Have to look and see who put this out. So if you're welcome, we're going to leave these up after the presentation because I don't think there's anybody else in here. So anyhow, we had kind of quite a bit of fun doing this. Actually, we found a few places, especially up in the Patty Canyon area that you'll see, and some places up 9 Mile at the old CCC camp that we knew about, but it was fun to go back and kind of see what's there now. So I guess we can start, and then we can make some comments. Y'all can ask questions or comments anytime you want. We got, an hour to do this, so.
A little bit less, I think.
Or less now,
Not
so.
long.
Okay.
We're going to look a little bit at what Missoula lost and a little bit of what Missoula retained. I think the part that it retained is really pretty interesting. I want to thank the Committee for the Humanities for funding the first project that we did, and that's the one that Ken referred to that's out at the airport. And to do that project, we were able to hire local photographers, Christy Hager, Marcy James, and Chris Audio. And we also hired a panoramic photographer from the state of Washington with a true panoramic camera. That's a camera where the camera actually spins around on a circular track to take an image from the North Hills, which you'll see out at the airport, and you'll also see upstairs at City Hall. This book, though, is really about Missoula as a place, what it was, how it got to be what it was, and what it is now. And to give you some idea of what we don't have, this was the first St. Patrick Hospital. And it was designed by Missoula architect A.J. Gibson, who came out to Missoula from Ohio via Butte and practiced in Missoula. And a lot of his buildings are still around. And Raphael Cohen has done a great book about A.J. Gibson. It's really a fine book. It's about Missoula, so it has a particularly local interest. And it's about Gibson's career. And Gibson early on got some pretty good commissions as a designer and a builder. He was a self-trained architect. This building, of course, is now, the St. Patrick Hospital is now, I think, the 4th building in this general location. This is just a glimpse of early Missoula from one of Stan's images that's actually not in the book, but I'm showing it because they wouldn't let us use circular pictures. It was part of their formula. They have a very specific formula for how we do it, so we weren't able to use this. But early on, Missoula was a kind of a rough place, trying to be a civilized town in the middle of the wilderness. So the sidewalks were boardwalks, and the streets were dirt streets. And we see this evolve over time from dirt to brick streets to now asphalt streets. This is the intersection of Higgins and Broadway. It says Higgins and Main, but what we know a little bit about it. And you can see from the graphics on the wall that our sign codes have changed a little bit. In some ways that's unfortunate. We did find out that the Chicago Beehive Company was actually a kind of a department store that bought year-end inventory from various places and then had outlet stores along the rail lines from Chicago to the West Coast. And the Beehive neighborhood in Chicago is noted for jazz, I believe, and not for what they sell, but here's bankrupt stock. People dressed much more formally, of course, 100 and some years ago. And the streets were extremely active. If you look closely, you can see everyone is wearing a hat of one kind or another. Here's a parade down Higgins Avenue. And here's Higgins Avenue today. This is the kind of parade we have every day. People lining up for trolleys. If we had trolleys now, the trolley went from Fort Missoula to Bonner, taking people out to the mill. It was powered by electricity produced by the Milltown Dam. And William Clark, who owned the dam and built the dam, also founded the Missoula Light and Water Company, and that's his sign right there, and his trolley company.
Which is the Masonic Temple.
Right, which was 100 years old last year, 1909, built in 1909. The building to the left was called the Swedish American Bank Building. It was A.J. Gibson's building. He built the building for his practice. There was retail, bank downstairs, and other offices and practitioners in the upstairs. That building, of course, replaced in the 50s.
The real quick, one other thing, the trolley, 1910 is when it
So there were various
electrified.
trolleys, but yeah.
electrified,
yeah.
and went till 1932 when buses took over.
Trolley companies, interestingly enough, were bought out by tire companies, by a consortium of tire companies, and you can guess why. And so here's that same street scene today with, of course, the Masonic Temple building, and in the background, the Federal building, which was built as the courthouse. And began in 1907 and completed during the WPA period in the 1930s with its final addition. This is Higgins Avenue down just north of the X's, and the building across the street that you see is another Gibson building, which is now the We Buy Anything store. There's a secondhand store there, and then a lot of artists live upstairs. And again, the hand of Gibson is all over town, which is really pretty interesting. These are bricks. There were, by rough calculation, 2.5 million bricks on Missoula streets. And we've managed, as part of our preservation project, to restore a couple of blocks of Railroad Street over the last couple of years, literally brick by brick. We were able to convince the city to give us the money that they were going to asphalt over the street to restore it with original bricks, and then we had to find about 25,000 bricks.
Interesting enough, I found this on eBay. I'd never seen this photo before, so I assume we're the first publisher of this. And we can date this 1912 because we know that's when the street was paved. And over in the left, over there was, let's see, that's where the United Way little old gas station is. That was a carnival area. I have a photo of Tom Mix when he brought his Wild West show to that particular area, and I've seen other photos. So the carnival was downtown at one time.
Fire, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess that poster there may be a carnival poster. You can barely see it there.
Yeah, I can't really see it. Fire had a huge influence on the way the downtown is. The Shapard Hotel burned, these 3 hotels burned, and the building on the corner of Pine and Higgins right now, where the Sushi Hana is, that's a 2-story building. When it was built and designed by Gibson, it was a 3-story building.
So if it looks truncated, if the proportions look wrong, it's because it lost its top floor.
1941, I think it was.
Yeah. And so here's that scene now. And you see this, the streetscape is actually much shorter. And that's the same building. You can see the courthouse, the top of the courthouse in this image. It wasn't completed until 1910. This is East Pine Street in the 1920s. Joseph Dixon, who was a prominent Missoulian, was governor, senator, assistant secretary of agriculture, brought the Forest Service to Missoula, was a prominent resident of this extremely prominent street, and was responsible for this landscape median. It's the only one in the downtown. And courtesy of the taxpayers of the city of Missoula, these trees were all planted. They had considerable influence over the city council and were able to form developer taxpayer partnerships to landscape much of Missoula. It's a National Historic District, and I have a map here. These are Missoula's National Historic Districts, and we have 9 of them. Fort Missoula, and then surrounding the downtown and including the downtown are the rest of our historic districts. And there are a couple of thousand buildings that are contributing buildings to these historic districts, and that's a voluntary designation through the National Park Service. And with that, of course, we can put signs commemorating those areas. This is West Main Street, rather. Here's the Daily Missoulian building, and you see the Higgins Bank building on the corner, still a landmark building in the downtown.
1889.
1889, correct. C.P. Higgins, one of the founders of Missoula, died just before the building was completed. Right down the street, actually. His house was on the corner down the street from that building. This is a reconstruction of the Missoulian building that was based on a lithograph that the architect and the owner found in the archives. And then they used the original window openings, which were still there. Some of you may remember Jay's Bar and Dance Hall. That's what was there before, and actually it's Jay LaFleche who put this building back together again. And this is part of the Downtown Historic District. This is an image, one of the ones from the original Then and Now project that Marcy James did the Now image for. You can see the trolley tracks. There were double trolley tracks going down Higgins Avenue toward the depot, and then a single track across the bridge. This was the second Florence Hotel building, which was erected in around 1907, I think,
It burned 1913.
or 1913. So this was erected after that. And then it burned in the 1930s.
1937.
6, 7, yeah.
37.
You can see this is what we think of now as the Macy's building, which was the Missoula Mercantile building, and again, Higgins's bank building there. And the predecessor to the Montgomery Ward building over here. This handsome
Donahue building.
this handsome building was part of the Four Corners Power Center in Missoula, which was the First National Bank building, which was part of the Missoula Mercantile conglomerate of ownerships, the Florence Hotel being the other one, A.B. Hammond's Hammond building, which was here, which was a 4-story, rather massive Chicago-style building. And from these four corners, the folks, the investors in their interests in real estate, mining, the Bonner Mill, they basically ran not just the town of Missoula and Missoula County, but much of western Montana, and their influence went all over the region. They weren't exactly the nicest people from the records, and they weren't exactly the most honest people from court records. A.B. Hammond, who was probably the most wealthy and powerful person in Missoula, managed to make so much money in the Bonner Mill from timber on public land up the Blackfoot that the federal government finally sued him for $2.5 million. in the 1890s. $2.5 million was a lot of money. Change in administration a few years later, I think it was in around 1908, the government settled with Hammond for $38,000 or some such amount.
And the Florence Hotel was opened in 1941, which is still with us today.
And this is from the Then and Now project. So you see, this building is now gone, as a matter of fact, and later we'll look at what's replaced it. But the basic character of the downtown has remained the same, even as buildings have traded places. This is looking down East Front Street. Again, if you look at this part, one of the interesting things about the Missoula Mercantile Building is how many iterations it went through. It's really a series of buildings that were pieced together and then knitted together with the facade more or less intact along Front Street. The old entrance to the lingerie section where the canopy was actually the Garden City Drug Building. And if you look on the alley, you'll see a sign that says stationery, cigars, and drugs and things like that. It's a kind of a ghost sign in the alley itself. And this is now, of course, the replacement of the second bank building, the First Interstate Bank building, designed with some intent to talk to the building across the street. The architects, with this treatment here of brick and concrete and banding and a kind of an implied cornice, were trying to establish a dialogue between the two. It didn't work, but it was an effort at least to acknowledge context. And that doesn't always happen in architecture. I think if you look at, for example, the Garlington Loan and Robinson building that's being built across from the Palace Hotel and the county courthouse, you'll see that there's a little bit of a disconnect in terms of buildings talking to each other. This is looking from the Penwell block or the Montaigne apartment building across to the Wilma Hotel. You'll see that the river, of course, ran right up against the base of the Wilma. That was changed in the 1960s by the Corps of Engineers.
And this bridge was built after the '08 flood. And the bridge we're on now is I remember because I was here, it was 1962. That's when they changed the course of the river and made Karas Park in that area. Because the river ran right next to the Wilma Theater before that.
Right, and this island was completely modified, and that's the fill that you see in Karas Park.
One other quick thing, that area also had at one time an ice skating rink, I believe, from some photo we have. Sort of a playground area.
The power plant that you see here was there into the 1960s, as a matter of fact. And the steam, Missoula was a greener city in its past. The steam from the power plant actually went up to the depot in a tunnel. And there were laterals that ran off into the radiators of the buildings on either side of Higgins Avenue. And the process steam was in a closed loop. It heated those buildings, and it went back to the power plant to be reheated to generate electricity. Yeah?
Didn't the Wilma use cooling also from the river?
It may have. It may have. I don't know about that, but yeah, there may have been intakes. There was a pool, of course, in the basement of the Wilma.
Most of you, I think, know that the river was called Missoula River, also Clark's apostrophe S Fork River at one time, now the Clark Fork.
And there are maps that even show it as the Hellgate River. And this power plant, again, was there until the 1960s. And this is, of course, the current bridge. And this is called the Millennium Building.
That first picture with the first bridge there, the trolley, so that was replaced?
Yeah.
After the '08 flood, they
So
built it.
that's the one that flooded out in '08?
Yeah, and then they moved part of that bridge to the footbridge by Eastgate.
The bridge that flooded out in 1908 was a truss bridge. And the trusses for that bridge are what are the pedestrian bridge
Oh, I see.
that goes across to the university. So here's 1900. And if you look now, with one exception, the character of the street is really an awful lot the same. This is West Broadway, down right just east of Russell Street, when gas was 19 cents.
I know about this. I found 2 photos of this area at the Library of Congress. This was part of the WPA, actually the Farm Security Administration photographic project in the 30s. And the interesting thing is, right here, this is a Gilmore Gas Company car with great big headlights, and they use that for promoting their Gilmore Gas and Oil, which, unless you're an antique car collector like me, you wouldn't know that from Adam, but I happened to spot that. And it's kind of a neat photo because of the gas price. And I mean, I liked it because I collect antique cars.
So we let Stan pick some of the old photos. And here we see the same scene today. Signage a little bit different, but this is that same building, that same house that you saw from about 1940. One of the photographers that came through was John Vachon, if those of you who know the history of photography during the FSA period. This is the original Missoula settlement, taken in the
1947, I believe.
47?
I think. I'd have to look.
The first settlement for Missoula was actually what was called Hellgate, and it was a crossroads where the north-south trail to the Jocko met the east-west Indian Trail, which became the Mullen Road. And it was settled at an Indian trading site, in fact. And what the settlers discovered was that there wasn't enough water in Grant Creek to run a mill, and there was enough water at the present site of Missoula, but not from the Clark Fork, but from Rattlesnake Creek, where there was a manageable, controllable supply of water to run an overshot wheel to build the first mill. And Missoula was called Missoula Mills in its very first incarnation. This is the old Hellgate Village now. Quite a considerable transformation. There's one building from that period that's out Mullen Road just east of the original Hellgate. And it's this building here, and this building tells a story that you would only know if you knew what a dog trot house was. Any of you who lived in the southeastern United States would know that there's a particular unique house type that has 2 rectangular, what are called pens, and a breezeway in the middle. That's the dog trot. The breezeway is, of course, closed in now. But this building, we're pretty sure, dates back to the Hellgate Village period. There's a guy named Bernie Weisgerber, who was one of the advisors to Frontier. There was a PBS program called Frontier House, right? He helped them figure out how to teach people to build log buildings. He lives in the 6 Mile area, and he's an expert on traditional buildings in America, traditional building types.
So either this is the oldest building, and I've always called the church out at Fort Missoula the oldest remaining building. Okay, I'm trying to put the name of the church at Fort Missoula.
Oh.
1863.
Yeah,
Of
St.
course,
John's, no.
it's been moved several times. Last time it was at Mullen Road, and then they moved it to the Fort Missoula Historical Museum. So I've always called that the oldest, but this
is the oldest residence in place, and Bernie's convinced that it was built right here. And the reason that it's a dog trot is that in the southern United States it's hot and it rains a lot. This building was built on piers, and so it's an absolutely dry building. Most log buildings, the sill logs are in the ground and they're rotted. This building is intact and dry. And actually the mining company that owns this site is going to give us the building, and we're going to try to get them to give us the land so that we can do some archaeology around it and do some interpretation. If they don't have to move the building and they can't mine the gravel underneath it, it might as well stay where it is and tell the story that is in fact its story. It was built so that people would live and sleep in this pen and cook and eat in this pen, and then the building was naturally cooled by breezes that the architecture actually developed in the trot in the middle, and then out gable end windows. Obviously in this climate, they filled the trot in pretty soon. But it was homesteaded by a man named Mitchell, Sidney Mitchell. We don't know much about him. Fort Missoula, Officers Row, and we have a section in the book on Fort Missoula because it's such an interesting story in terms of the continuity and of its functions and its place in American history through World War II as an alien detention camp.
One quick thing on this too, I'm putting a ad in for the Museum of Mountain Flying. Next year is the 100th anniversary of the first flight into Missoula by Eugene Ely. Happened right behind these buildings in 1911, June 28th. And we're going to have a big ceremony at the fort and out at the museum, hopefully with a whole bunch of antique airplanes. And we're now trying to get a quarter scale model of the first airplane, which was a Curtiss Pusher, to be a flying model, and hopefully we'll fly it around Fort Missoula and around the airport. So you'll see stuff on that next year.
And this portion of Fort Missoula is now managed and maintained by the Northern Rockies Heritage Center, on whose board Stan is. It's a local nonprofit. This is an image during the period of the alien detention camp, and these are the detention center barracks, guard towers, non-commissioned officers buildings. These buildings, of course, are still there. And these buildings you'll recognize as the Lolo National Forest building and the National Guard building. You can see that there is nothing else going on in the Missoula Valley. And this is 1943, probably. Chris Audio and I climbed the water tower to take this picture. I can't say that it was the wisest thing I've done, but it was pretty interesting getting up on the catwalk. As a sidelight, many of you have cell phones. There will be cell tower antennas clamped to the water tower, which will give the Northern Rockies some rent and more cell tower services, we needed it. But anyway, that's sort of an attempt to marry historic preservation with modern technology. We won't be looking at a new monopole tower out there at all. You may or may not actually see the antennas because they'll be clamped vertically where there are currently vertical bars on the catwalk as it is now. When the day is gone that they don't need to use those things, they will be removed, so it's a reversible action. And Verizon will be doing lead paint abatement and repainting the water tower to stabilize it as part of a preservation effort. So we work with the industry when we can. Sometimes we just tell them they can't put cell towers in certain places.
Is that water tower still hold water?
It doesn't, no. No, the fort is now on mountain water. Yeah.
One quick trivia thing on the fort. I think you all know that there were Italian seamen. They were not prisoners of war. They were detainees. They were all civilians. Plus, most of you knew Umberto Benedetti and
Alfredo Chipolato.
And Alfredo was at the World's Fair when he was picked up, and I think Bert was too. No, he was off the ship, I believe. Anyhow, and then there were Japanese detained here right after Pearl Harbor, and we've always thought that there were some Germans here, and a month or so ago we had the daughter of one of the German detainees here, so that proved that there were some Germans here, but they were here a very short time and then sent to Bismarck, North Dakota. And I've still been trying to find out how many were here, and they were either German aliens, they could have been German Americans too, So it's kind of interesting, we had all three, Italian, Japanese, and Germans here during the war.
Yeah, the Japanese story is a really tragic kind of a story. And the United States actually got Japanese nationals from as far away as Peru and detained them here at Fort Missoula for a number of years. This is the amalgamated sugar plant out in what is now the Reserve Street large box area, the big box store. There were sugar beet fields and fields of sugar beets in the Bitterroot Valley and all around for a period of time, and that building is this building in another incarnation. Now, a very modern intervention in terms of the glass and steel cube penetrating the walls of the building, but it's a very interesting building if you get out that way and take a look at it.
And I know the year it closed because I bought all the employees' lockers out of the plant and took them up to my ski shop at Snowbowl in 1966. So I know that's the year that the plant closed.
This is another thing that was sort of a find, the Target range up in Patty Canyon, up actually on the top of Patty Canyon. And
this was moved here from Target Range when it started developing for target practice for the troops at Fort Missoula.
And these are the sort of, I'm not even sure what you call these things.
Well, it's where the guys would kneel here, the targets are right over here, and after they shot, they'd go out and put up new targets. And it's the first time I'd ever really seen these. We don't really want too many people to know exactly where they are because we don't want them to, and there's...
Dismantle them.
Yeah, and there's some writing on this, on some of these posts, but it's up in Patty Canyon area, right off the picnic area there.
It's
And,
actually a structured berm
Yeah.
that goes like this, and then the cribs are on the backside so that they could climb up and hold the targets up and take them down.
And they had berms every so often, so many yards for rifle practice. They probably used this clear through the war, as far as I know.
I would
Was that
guess.
during World War II that they would have done that?
Yeah.
Just two.
Actually, that area up there was part of the original
Yeah.
boundary of the fort.
Yeah,
Right.
part of the original
Forest
timber reserve. There's also a ski area right off of there too, which the lean-to is still there, but you got to really hunt for it.
This is a mid-century image of Fort Fizzle, which is just west of Lolo, for those of you for orientation.
1935 is this
Yeah.
photo.
And then this is a Forest Service treatment of the same area. There's a little pull-in picnic area there. The story of Fort Fizzle has to do with Chief Joseph's trek east. And the Fizzle part is that the people from Missoula hunkered down here and they were ready for a big fight, and Chief Joseph just took everybody around them at night and headed off toward the Big Hole. They never really figured it out. This is the M early on, when it was a cluster of rocks. And we had an intern working with us named Ross Carlson, who was a big help. He got up there and managed to find some folks up by the new, now concrete, of course. M. The M dates back to 1910. It's the best date we've got on it in various iterations. Campus of the University of Montana with the original buildings. And of course, not much development at all around it. The original campus was only 40 acres. And these are A.J. Gibson buildings. Some of you may remember this is called the Math Building now, but it was the women's dormitory. Main hall, of course. The first gymnasium building had a couple of semicircular turrets in the front. It was kind of an interesting architectural treatment. And then this was the Venture Center, which was the science building. Some of you may remember that building. I actually worked in the Venture Center back in the early 1980s.
One kind of interesting thing about the Venture Center, That actually was the first building completed
Right.
before Main Hall. I took geology classes in there. And years ago, I won't mention the name of the president, but they were going to tear this down. And we went over to Helena and got an injunction to stop them from tearing this down. And about 2 or 3 in the morning, they sent the bulldozers out and leveled this before we could stop them.
2 dozers and a cable.
And it actually had, we had an engineering school here before Bozeman. And it was also, a museum was in there, I believe. There was quite a few things in that building, and that's all there was at the university were these buildings. The gym and grandstand it was built in 05, I believe, and that was the first football field. It's been moved.
It was moved to
Moved
here.
then out to where the track
Dorn
place is
Laser.
now, and then back to where it is now. So it's moved several times.
And Chris Audio did this image,
This is the men's gym right there.
right? And there's Main Hall, for reference.
Has the campus grown from that?
Yes, from the original 40 acres. I think this part of the campus, I should know, is around 120 acres. And then Mount Sentinel is also part of it.
And the Prescott House right over the left.
Right there, yeah. The heating plant from 1922, I think.
Yeah, around there. So I think
And
that's
there's-
where they want to build their biomass
There's the heating
now.
plant now, and there's the Prescott House, dwarfed by Aber. And of course, the Adams Center. Main Hall, A.J. Gibson. The style is called Richardson Romanesque, with the Romanesque arches, the rounded arches with the barrel vaults, and the spires. This building has been stabilized. One of these, I think it was this one of these spires was literally, gravity was all that was holding it to the building. And it's been re-roofed with an artificial, a composite material that was recycled, made out of recycled tires. It looked just like gray shingles, slate shingles. Originally, it was cedar shingles.
And some of you who've been around here a lot longer than me, you'll remember that you could drive around the oval at one time.
You still can.
Well, I don't know when they quit letting people drive around there.
It's actually set up, it's strong enough to hold a fire truck. It's emergency access for the center of campus. Another image of the campus, a
You know, you
McKay
see the
image.
cars still driving
Yeah.
around. So. These buildings were built during World War I as dorms for troops that were stationed here, going to school here in World War I.
And you can see the stadium is
Yeah,
moved.
this is the second stadium. So that's a dorm. That one, that one were, I think, all built during the First World War.
And then you've got Schreiber and the library. 1950s image of the airport.
They're now, I think you read that they're, seems like I got a bad throat here, they're gonna move the tower out in the middle of towards the main runway. I think they've already broken ground for it. In this airport, there's a second airport, Hale Field, where the fairgrounds and the Votech was the first airport in the late 20s. Our airport now, excuse me, the WPA project started in 1941, and that's when Northwest moved over. They were landing at Hale Field, and when our present airport was started in 41, Northwest Airlines moved over there. Johnson Flying Service moved to Hale Field in 1954, and then moved out to the present airport afterwards.
This is the Northern Pacific Depot with the yin and yang symbol up here, the gateway to the Orient. And of course, the depot today. This is a look at the roundhouses in the downtown. One of the reasons that Missoula was such a successful community was that it cut a deal with the Northern Pacific Railroad, and the people who cut the deal were the investors in the Missoula Mercantile and the First National Bank, and at that time C.P. Higgins, to give them land, because the railroad couldn't condemn land for anything but a railroad. So to give them land for a place to repair trains and set them up was part of the deal. They also got the contract for all the railroad ties and all the timber that the railroad needed, and that was part of the timber that Hammond and his Sawyers cut up the Blackfoot on the public's land. And from Waterworks Hill today, this is the remains of the roundhouse setup. It's just the turntable for the trains. This is the original Missoula County Courthouse building, which was literally in front of the current courthouse, built in 1872, finished. And it was a clapboard building, an L-shaped building. And part of the deal when the current county courthouse was completed was that the building was sold at auction on the courthouse steps for, I believe it was $118, and with a condition that it be removed in 10 days. And so it was removed and recycled, and this is North 3rd Street. Right behind, there's a little shopping center. You might recognize that little pagoda thing from the shopping center right there at Orange Street. And this building, I'm happy to say, has been repainted. But this is the original county courthouse building in pieces, in parts, reassembled on the north side. Shell Station on Higgins Avenue. You'll recognize these buildings over here for reference. And you might notice those towers there are those towers right there. And that's the Big Dipper parking lot. Famous Missoula spot. This was the First National Bank building. Part of Missoula's octopus, as it was called in the current press in 1890.
This is the original mill right here, built in 1864, right behind the bank, and it was torn down in 1912, so it lasted quite a while. And we've got pictures of it, a better photo of it, not in this book, the front of it, and I think there's a photo of it being torn down too.
And this building was demolished in the 1960s because they were worried about earthquakes, which has now, in its last iteration, been replaced by this very modern treatment, again with this reference to the Mercantile building, and then of course the Wilma, now seen in a completely different kind of architecture. Much more emphasis on the lightness of material than the solidness of the granite and brick of the previous building. This is the Stark School up in the 9 Mile Valley, the community of Stark. There were a couple thousand people there, and a few thousand more in the 9 Mile Valley during its heyday in mining. And the Anaconda Company had a lumber mill up there and was busy taking timber out of the 9 Mile Valley. A lot of gold came out of the 9 Mile Valley in the Kennedy Creek area and those other areas in the upper 9 Mile. And this is the Stark School today, and the 9 Mile Community Church has been relocated back here. That's its second move as well. And the school is listed in the National Register of Historic Places and maintained by the 9 Mile community folks. This was the first 9 Mile house, which was actually across the street from the current 9 Mile house, which you see here, which was partly recycled from that earlier building when it was moved. The 9 Mile remount. And it today with, I think these are WPA buildings, aren't they?
CCC.
CCC buildings.
CCC.
So that's just some of what we have then and now. Any questions?
Question. Building on South and Stevens, there's a white building. It's kitty corner from the fairgrounds and across from the business.
Yeah.
That was part of the airport, wasn't it?
No, that was a nightclub.
I realized that.
What was it?
Maechling, chicken.
Okay, then there was another name, which I can't remember now. As far as I know, it had nothing to do with the airport, which was Hale Field across the street. I mean, it was a nightclub at one time, and I'm sure all the pilots had a good time over there. And the school district has it. I hope they keep it and don't tear it down. And the other, it may have been a WPA building, I'm not sure.
It looks like it could have been,
Yeah,
yeah.
and there's a WPA building on the fairgrounds, which is now their maintenance building, which I'm sure you've all seen, which they're now trying to decide what to do with. And the fairground just got on the National Register recently, so.
Yeah, we just got the fairgrounds listed as a National Historic District. So,
Other question. Did I read somewhere that one of the trolley cars is being restored?
yeah, out at Fort Missoula, yeah. It'll be housed, there's a big building, a very simple building that's been completed across from Building T1, which is the old post headquarters, which the county now owns. And that trolley,
Well, that's the
53?
streetcar that Dr.
Streetcar.
Dieter gave to us
Yeah.
when I was the director out there. And it was I think it was the Bonner car, I'm not sure. And we had it actually restored amateur-wise and put it on track. Unfortunately, it was outside, a lot of stuff got stolen off of it, all the luggage racks. I even found the original hook on the wire that it ran on, and that all got stolen. But it's been restored, and it's up in Big Sandy.
Big Sandy right now.
It's been there for years until
Yeah.
they get the building finished. And a guy restored the whole streetcar, and they bought original trucks for it. When I was out there, I got railroad wheels, which are a lot higher than streetcar wheels, but better than sitting it on the ground. That was back in the 70s. And I hope it gets back one of these days. They got to finish that building first.
Yeah, and I think at some point, they had a plan that they were actually going to lay track out at Fort
Yeah,
Missoula and
yeah.
run the trolley around the track.
Yeah.
I don't know if that'll really happen.
That'll happen when we get Amtrak back here southern, on the
Right.
southern.
Yeah, and it's running up the Bitterroot.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming.